Okay, thank you,
Shikha.
Shikha.
But now where were we?
We are in the second paragraph, third paragraph. Adult conscious awareness.
1 second. We adults get only very rare glimpses of these other two parts of our mind brain, even though it is impossible that they are not be equal parts of the function of awareness. Classically, we have referred to our ordinary, rather isolated awareness as real or normal consciousness. We have called any awareness of the other two functions altered forms of consciousness and have been conditioned to believe them pathological aberrations. There are people who manage, through rigorous and lengthy disciplines, to become consciously aware of the primary process, that general field of awareness apparently embracing all thought everywhere. Reports of awareness of the primary process are referred to as introverted mystical experiences, unity experiences in which no sensory activity is involved. Reports of consciousness of birth, body, earth knowing are generally referred to as extroverted mystical experiences, unity experiences of the hologram on a sensory level.
Okay, so this when you're looking at unity experiences, uh, Dr. Eben Alexander, his brain was totally full of pus, but he had a very rich and profound experience in that particular state where his brain just could not actually function, but he had that experience. So this is what unity consciousness is. It doesn't need to actually operate in the brain, but there's a gestalt which takes place.
Although these altered states, anyone saying something?
No.
Although these altered states are largely denied validity by the academic community, they are so rewarding that people devote years of their life or risk their bodies and brains through drugs to attempt to experience them. Most of us border on falling into awareness of these other functions continually, which our conditioned social self feels to be a threat of a collapse into chaos, because our idea schemes would apparently be overwhelmed. Yet, the child mind is equally all these states. The child is all this without differentiation, though, while conscious as them, he is not exactly aware of them, which is rather like a fish not being aware of water because there is no other world.
Okay, so over here, whenever we are going into altered states using the hemisync process, this is what is happening. We are stepping out of the boundaries, we are stepping out of the box. And over here, he says that the child is all this without differentiation, although while conscious of them. So he knows that they are there. So he's experiencing them, but he has no knowledge of what it is. So when we want wisdom, all the time you have to have experience as well as information. Otherwise, you will not get wisdom as to real understanding of what is happening. So the child can't really understand what is happening, but the child is experiencing. That is why when in the previous chapter, when the child said the bear is there, as far as the child is concerned, in his conception, the bear is there. Now, if you tell the child, no, it's not there, then there's a distinction created between what you are saying and what the child is experiencing, which creates a problem for the child going further ahead.
To become aware of the mother as a person to be related to and loved, the infant in utero must separate from her. To become aware of the infinite possibilities of the earth hologram and
One
primary
second.
process, the child must separate from them in order to relate functionally to them. Among the many purposes nature has for the division of labor is giving the child this objectivity and distinction between possible functions.
Okay, can you stop here, Shivangla? Over here, to become aware of the mother as a person, to be related to and loved, the infant in utero must separate from the mother. Okay, so what does this imply? Unless there is duality, I cannot experience something else. Like we say in our in the gateway about curiosity. So Brahman knows everything. So if you know everything, can you know anything? So you have to separate from that everything to be able to experience something. This is what this is. implying. So a separation is necessary for you to experience that experience. Now Shrimangala has disappeared.
As importantly, only through a separated consciousness can a volitional decision making function be developed. The early child has no volition. The child's decisions are made by his or her driving genetic intent. This is why it is not possible for the early child to disobey willfully. Age 7 has historically been called the age of decision because the objective self system becomes functional at this time. If a mature creative synthesis were to act on our basic worldview concepts, we would lose our orientation, live in chaos, and not survive. So, some portion of the brain system must maintain our initial and accurate world orientation. Naturally enough, this is the job of the old brain system. It replicates the brain developed over millennia for relating to the earth. The old brain actually runs the body from first heartbeat to last gasp, maintaining the body's homeostasis, stable sameness, the synchrony of heartbeat, oxygen content, blood pressure, glandular output, body heat, the coordinating of quadrillions of cells, a job carried on without our conscious awareness, and thank God, without need for our volitional interferences.
Can you just imagine if we had to constantly think of all the chemicals that needed to be secreted, the food getting digested, tears forming in our eyes, all the muscles acting the way they needed to act, the heart beating. If we had to consciously control everything, can you imagine what would be the result? So the reptilian brain, or the first brain, the brain stem, takes care of all these survival issues, and we don't have to pay any attention to them. So it's the autonomous nervous system which actually runs all this stuff.
The old brain is probably the carrier of our genetic coding, providing the single driving intent that propels the infant body into interaction with its earth. So it is only economical that this system maintain our primary worldview in the original structure developed and perfected in the first 7 years. The primary
So
process is
now again, this is why the first 7 years of growing up becomes so important, because your worldview actually rests on whatever you have learned in this first 7 years.
I've lost it.
The primary process.
The primary process is the function through which we are conscious of the earth as a thinking globe, the flow of life, the general field of awareness, and almost surely even larger ecologies of thought. The primary process is also past, current, and potential possibility and experience. Other cultures have maintained a much greater openness to the primary process than Western culture has. But some university laboratories are beginning to get minuscule glimpses of a possible bridge. Since the primary process is the general field of awareness, it also encompasses the Earth hologram and so is closely linked to the old brain system. Indications are that the right hemisphere, which has traditionally been connected to the left hand, is more intimately connected with body processes than the left hemisphere, lending some support to using this as a model for primary process and social self. Through biofeedback, we are making rudimentary moves towards strengthening ties to the older brain system, but unfortunately, we are using biofeedback to try to seize volitional control of autonomic processes that are not designed for such control. In focusing intelligence on such an arbitrary interaction, we fail to see that harmonious synchrony with old brain functions, not volitional control of them, is the issue. Having so little awareness of our primary processes, the next thrust of our alienated efforts at control will B. To try to seize volitional control over primary processes, which will further fragment intelligence. Yet, our ordinary consciousness cannot help but be the result of all three functions, a paradox that has filled many volumes of speculation. The division of labor is designed to develop a gestalt self, a conscious volitional awareness able to orient to the living earth exactly as it is, creatively interact with that earth through creative logic, a logic that can interact with the hologram to change aspects of that hologram, creatively
So
interact.
this is like knowing the source code, right? Now, if a person knows the source code of a computer program, they can make changes to the front, the screen of the program. But if you don't know the source code, you can't change the program.
Creatively interact with the mind brain's own products, which include the primary process, and finally mix the three capacities. Each of these capacities is also a matrix, and the developmental stages being outlined here are the structures and shifts of those matrices. The first 7 years are spent in structuring a knowledge of the earth as matrix, and the self must then be born out of that matrix in order to relate to it. This relationship is the development of personal power and creative logic, which give the self as the new matrix at adolescence. Standing in that matrix, mind then structures the knowledge of the primary process and becomes matrix itself, completing the movement from concreteness to abstraction. Nature would never program our automatic shift of matrix without also programming adequate bonds for us between our matrices. Just as the infant at birth has its umbilical cord and a host of other channels for interaction with the new matrix, the great shift unfolding at age 7 is every bit as critical as the one at birth. Unfortunately, it virtually never succeeds. Virtually all of us were still born at this birth. Understand that the separation I am talking about during the period from 4 to 7 is a functional separation within the brain, a separation between the earth hologram effect in the brain, a conscious ecosystem, and a primary process. The bonds to be established are signals, functions, patterns of rhythmic firing of brain cells, processes of interaction within the brain. The primary process proves to be the bonding agent, an agent which is then designed to expand into its own full dimensions as eventual matrix. Because the bonds between child and earth matrix are established through the embracing primary process, I call them primary perceptions, for all bonds are perceived experiences. Primary perceptions become noticeable, if we bother to notice, around age 4. Along with those nightmares, brain growth spurt, completion of corpus callosum, and all the rest. Chapter 14. Primary perceptions, bonding with the earth. I see white light coming out of your head and fingers, reports little Jessie. There are bright colors around your face and body. Larry, age 7, sees white light moving in and out of people's bodies. He sees red light around trees and orange light around dogs. Bryn, 7, sometimes sees specks of color float around her bedside. So go the reports from children studied by James Peterson. Unmute.
Yeah, so what is happening here is clairvoyance, okay? So the kids they are actually clairvoyant. They see these colors. And then when adults start telling them that, it's not, you can't see it, it's useless, this, that, they shut down that process. And we go through so many lengths to take aura pictures and all that nowadays.
Over the past 2 years, child psychiatrist Gerald Jampolsky has studied some 150 children who, between ages 3 and 4, have also reported extrasensory perceptions. Jampolsky's cases fell largely into classical extrasensory categories: clairvoyance, in which events take place beyond the range of vision or hearing are reported by the child. Telepathy, in which information or messages come from specific people at a distance. Precognition, in which an event is perceived before it has actually taken place. Considerable literature exists on ESP and psychic phenomena among children. Eloy Shields presents evidence that telepathic ability peaks at age 4, at which time their parents may begin to be aware of such activity. An English acquaintance of mine who considers herself psychic and who can certainly pick other people's brains remarkably well told me that her two daughters displayed astonishing psychic abilities at age 4. These abilities proved to be in the ESP categories, with telepathy between mother and children being the strongest. Sadly, the abilities faded by age 8, a source of chagrin to the mother. While working on materials for her
So
dissertation,
what happens here, if you see, many times when these children are, portraying these abilities, either they'll be debunked or then they become drawing room, entertainment. So that is what is happening with many of these people who are doing this midbrain activation that can normally take place only in children up to the age of 7, and now they're pushing it to 8 or 9. But after some time the children lose the ability simply because they are either ignored, or then they become, they'll always be told in the drawing room to come and do a trick and all that, and then they lose interest in it, and that capacity gets lost.
while working on materials for her dissertation, a musicologist friend discovered that almost any 4-year-old child has perfect pitch, the ability to recognize and name musical sounds. All that was necessary was preliminary work with them in labeling so that they could communicate their knowledge and an explanation of what the game was about. She found, however, that the majority of children lose this ability by 7 or 8. Already the ramifications go off in every direction. Why age 4? Why do such abilities so often fade at age 7 or 8? Do all children possess such abilities? If not, why not? Can these abilities be encouraged? Are they worth encouraging? Of what use could such capacities be? These talents are biological, part of nature's built in system for communication and rapport with the earth, part of our bonds with that matrix, part of the emerging system for survival, related to the division of labor, almost surely stage specific in their unfolding, and no more fragile or rare than general intelligence. I find no evidence of being without a vehicle of expression. We cannot experience any phenomena without an operational structure for organizing that content into a perception. No matter how abstract, ethereal, or remote a phenomenon might seem, so long as we are here in this quite material body, that effect must be structured through our conceptual system. I prefer the term primary perception to extrasensory perception because all perceptions of this nature must arise from that primary process within us. I have a number of examples that I favor because of their authenticity and clarity. Some of these I have used in a previous book, but confess that I now see them in a more practical framework. Dr. Charles Start relates
Okay, so Dr. Charles Start was the person who actually got Robert Monroe's book published.
Dr. Charles Start relates an experiment in telepathy in which a person was placed in a sensory isolation chamber, a room from which light and sound are excluded. The person was then connected with a polygraph machine and he was covered with electrodes to pick up all the brainwave activity, EEG, monitor his heart and pulse rate, record muscular activity and sweat, and so on. All these readings were recorded by the polygraph machine, giving a rather thorough indication of what was going on with that person. A considerable distance away, in another isolation chamber, another subject was going to be periodically shocked. The first subject was asked to try to sense when the second subject was shocked. The first subject never seemed to sense when the other was shocked. Telepathy was apparently not increased by isolation, but that first subject's polygraph reading showed significant leaps at that precise instance that the other subject was shocked. Why the researchers wondered did subject A not know when subject B was shocked, when all of the subject A's body readings clearly indicated the exact moments. Obviously, the self system which subject A thinks of as the whole show is only one of our concept percept processes.
Okay, so now over here, what is happening is we are bombarded by 40 million bits of information every moment, and we process only 40 bits of information. So what we think is reality is not actual reality because we are not actually processing all the data. A similar experiment was also done with DNA. Now, what was happening was that a small DNA sample of a person was taken, and first they put all these sensors in the DNA. Now, whatever was happening to the person was reflected in the DNA in the same room. Then they took that DNA to another room and they found it was still effective. They took the DNA to another building and they found it was still effective. They took the DNA to another town and it was still effective. And then they transferred the DNA across the world and it was still affected. Why? Because there was a resonance between the DNA and the person from whom the DNA was taken. So this is exactly the same thing which is happening over here, because person A was told to feel when the B item was being shocked. But because it was not consciously aware to him, he could not perceive it. But his senses, his internal senses, actually perceived it. So, again, what it implies over here is that our body systems are extremely sensitive. What has happened with us is we've stopped listening to our body. That is where the problem actually lies. So if we can listen to our body, the kind of information that we can get is pretty phenomenal.
Please switch off your TV. Ernst Hilgard of Stanford University, in his 20 odd years of research into learning, trance, and hypnosis, finds evidence of different learning systems and even different perceptual systems within each of us. That with which we identify as anxiety conditioned adults is only one part, though I am sure a major part of our complete thinking organism. For a couple of years, friends and I met regularly to delve in amateur, haphazard ways into the latent possibilities we had sensed within us. We learned to enter a deep hypnotic state by suspending all volitional control over personal body movements and thoughts and surrendering our volition and decision making to a member of the group. One evening, when it was my turn to act as guide, I had prepared some geometric drawings, carefully made with compass and ruler. I had these in a manila envelope, and when the group reported the required hypnotic depth, I explained that I was going to look at some drawings to see if I could telepathically send some images to the group. Everyone agreed on the purpose, agreement being a necessity, and I pulled out the first drawing, a kind of square cross inside a circle. I had thought it would be necessary to concentrate very hard and long in order to send this image. But before I even had time to take a good look, everyone had it.
Okay, so Joe McMonaghan always says that as soon as the intent to do the remote viewing is set, the remote viewing has already happened. So this is exactly what this is. As soon as he thought of taking out a picture, the others automatically got it because the remote viewing had already happened.
Spread out around the dimly lit room, flat on their backs, with eyes closed, they indeed had seen or perceived each image almost simultaneously with my own looking. At no point did I do anything, indeed, I seemed incidental to the process. A naturalist
So again, there was a story about Joe McMonaghan. There was this group of people who wanted to test him. So they said that, okay, we are going to test you. And they went and figured out 5 different targets for him. And what Joe did was that before he went for the meeting, he had already remote viewed all the targets, put down his drawings in place, and then he gave, once they asked him to do the remote viewing, he took out only the envelope which he thought that they were going to select for the remote viewing. Once he gave them that envelope and he found that it was absolutely accurate, then he took out the other 4 and said, these were your other targets. So he really shocked the entire committee.
A naturalist specializing in the study of foxes described his long-term study of a particular fox family located near a creek in a ravine. One beautiful sunny afternoon, he observed the mother doing something he had never seen a fox do. She suddenly left her burrow and kids, went up the hillside some 30 yards, and began busily digging another burrow. She then carried each of the kids up the hill to the new den. Several hours later, the reason for this atypical act became clear. Although the weather remained beautiful and clear, a flash flood cascaded down, flooding the ravine. A cloud burst many miles upstream proved the culprit. Had the family remained where they were, they would surely have been drowned.
Okay, so this again, there was when the tsunami hit Southeast Asia, not one animal died. They'd all moved inland. Okay, so the animals are actually more connected with the Earth system matrix than us. So they get information from the Earth matrix much more than us.
Or is it because we are not listening?
Because we are not listening, of course we can also get it. In fact, whenever there's an earthquake, you'll find that your head will start to buzz a little, become a little fuzzy. We did these experiments during the lunar eclipse, and as the lunar eclipse was coming, everyone started feeling fuzzy in the head. Because why? We were paying attention, so we were aware of what was happening in our system.
The newly developing science of earthquake prediction relies heavily on clues furnished by animals. Shortly before an earthquake, domestic animals become nervous. Fowls refuse to roost as usual. Burrowing animals leave their holes. Rats and mice leave buildings. Primary perceptions are bonds with the earth, the natural interrelations of the hologram. A primary perception may take place, though, through but is not limited to the 5 senses. In the early years, primary perceptions are almost surely part of the general cognitive fabric of the child's reality. Not until some division of labor among brain functions has begun and the effects of selective inattention have encroached will primary perceptions be distinguished by the child as something other than his or her ordinary 5 sensory functions. Primary perceptions are as biological as any other form of perception, are almost surely genetic to our species as well as many other species, rather than space age esoterica, spiritual gifts, or psychological aberrations, and are or should be clearly developmental as all intelligence is. Furthermore, ESP is only one manifestation of the primary process from which such perceptions arise. Primary perceptions are biological because they take place within the mechanism of the brain. We cannot perceive anything except through our conceptual processes. We all know people who believe themselves above material and mundane things or who partake of universal spiritual capacities. Always, they too have, at base, those mundane biological functions of brain operating, although those operations may have expanded wonderfully beyond our mundane practices.
Okay, so they did a study of Joe McMonaghan and they found that he was very, very mundane. So how he was doing the remote viewing, no one could guess. He has an accuracy level of some 84% or something like that. And that's literally impossible. From all the options that are available, if that guy can perceive something, it's really, really fantastic.
Recent evidence shows that some so called psychic phenomena in which objects are moved by thought relate directly to the old brain and cerebellum, and for good reasons. That is where all movement is coordinated, where our concrete world concepts remain intact, where brain hologram and earth hologram mirror each other. Their original language as a body response remains intact, and word as a label and the object so labeled remain a single unit. The old brain is not personal as such. It moves deep into our material grounds of being. Psychokinesis, or moving objects by thought, is quite rare before age 7 but is frequently found increasingly today after that age. The reason is clear. Psychokinesis is a creative interaction with the earth, ordinarily state specific to the shifts in logic and matrix taking place then. On the other hand, primary perceptions such as ESP are simply matters of information selectively drawn from the flow of things through the individual primary process in one's brain and communicated through ordinary conceptual patterning. No creative interaction or acting back on the earth matrix is involved, and so almost surely different brain functions would be employed than in psychokinesis. ESP is a simple reception from the primary process, designed to enhance well being and security and to give information over a wide range. When the Ugandan mother intuitively knows her infant is about to urinate, she is not relying on ordinary conscious decision making except in responding to her signals. One way of describing this is to say that her right hand responds to and carries out the orders of her left hand. Bonding is one aspect of primary perception, whether at birth or at age 7, when we should bond to the earth. Fragile and tenuous at birth, these bonds are designed always to grow into channels of personal power and possibility. Although all brains are patterned alike, probably no two of them have ever functioned exactly alike. The possibilities for rhythmic patterning among those billions of neurons in the new brain are simply too vast and flexible for us to point to one area as the area for some activity.
Okay, so what this implies is that the neural pathways that are developed are unique for every and each individual one of us. So our environment as well as genetic, our relationship with the matrices will create a different bonding on a different neural pathway or different brain for each and every one of us.
Rhythmic patterning changes continually in largest shifts, where primary perceptions such as ESP form. I do not know because they do not involve movement. They probably do not involve the cerebellum. Furthermore, brain function and thought product are probably never exact equivalents. Brain and thinking may operate like conductive wire and electricity. The brain may conduct but never actually contain thought, just as the body may have energy flows and rhythms that operate in conjunction with it, rather as the radiation belts operate around and yet within the earth. White finds that approximately one child out of every 30 is exceptionally bright, happy, socially charming, versatile, flexible, physically healthy, and adaptable in outstanding ways. He also finds that this development is anything but an accident. These children have enjoyed surprisingly similar home environments and parental interactions in spite of sharp differences in social, economic, and racial backgrounds. His findings call to mind the sharp difference of intellectual growth between the Ugandan child delivered at home by the mother and the child delivered in the hospital. In the same way, there can be little doubt that primary perceptions are the birthright of each child, just as superb intelligence and happiness are. Most of us, after all, are born with a pretty standard huge brain. Even when damaged, the brain's ability for compensation and recovery is remarkable. However,
Okay, so over here, there was this guy, I was reading in another book, there was a rod which went through his left brain. Okay, now his personality was a certain, let's say personality A. Now he could function, everything was functioning, but he became a very mean-minded person simply because the left brain is dealing with logic. How are you interacting with logically with the world? So he became very well like when a person becomes drunk, the person gets incoherent and he doesn't know what he's saying or doing. That started happening to that guy. Okay, so he could function and he could do everything, but his total nature underwent a shift. So the brain, both sides of the brain can do everything. As we read over here, specialization starts taking place at the age of 7. So if another part of the brain is damaged, over a period of time, the other part of the brain can start learning how to do that particular function.
Most of us, after all, are born with a pretty standard huge brain. Even when damaged, the brain's ability for compensation and recovery is remarkable. However, more children display ESP than superb overall intelligence, indicating that primary perceptions are so much a part of our genetic fiber that they are even less prone to destruction than other aspects of intelligence. This means that our built in capacity for bonding with the earth on a physical level is powerful and more tenacious than the more fragile capacities for developing high level abstract thinking and creation. Certain kinds of ESP have frequently been observed in mentally retarded people, again indicating that these capacities are part of our inbuilt machinery. This also indicates one of the probable causes of the loss of such capacities. The mentally retarded cannot be fully acculturated, anxiety conditioned, channeled, and restricted the way the rest of us can through social cueing that shuts off primary perceptions. Primary perceptions are developmental in that they tend to disappear like a muscle atrophying if they are not developed along with the rest of our faculties.
So again, over here, what this means is that if you are not going to be using them, it will disappear. So using the faculties, using the facilities that are there are extremely important.
Should we stop for today?
Yeah, we can stop.
It's because you have to.
Any questions, anyone?
It was pretty clear, Niket.
Yeah, I think it's
Very
coming
interesting.
pretty,
Very
yeah.
interesting.
So the growth of, I mean, like, intuitive abilities, the more you practice it, that is what will keep it. And unfortunately, we keep stunting our children that no, this is not accurate. This is not accurate. This is something should be developed in children actually. Anyone else? Anything?
I have an observation to make, Bhaiya.
Yeah.
They have done the research in Uganda, but I feel this is applicable for all third world countries and all their who have, similar kind of background.
Absolutely. They're just giving a generalization.
Yes.
That this is what is required. The matrix that they are talking about, the mother matrix, the proximity to the child, the skin to skin touching, the child sleeping with the mother, the child, the mother breastfeeding the child, all these things become extremely important in the development of a child. In Western countries, you're isolating the child, you're putting the child in another room. They were being bottle fed. Now some people are saying that, yeah, they have started allowing the child to be put on the chest of the mother and all that. So that is something that, this is what is explaining what is happening. And it just,
yeah, but breastfeeding kahan ho raha hai? People are now like putting it and expressing it and put it in the bottle.
Yeah, but then that's not, you're just giving the milk. Yeah. But the aspect of the child's skin touching,
the personal touch, yes.
Yeah, the heartbeat of the child, the mother and the child interaction, the child looking at the face of the mother while the child is suckling, you will find that the child is constantly looking at the face of the mother. That is an extremely important aspect of the feeding process. It's not only just the milk. Anyone else? Anything? Okay, so we'll be meeting at 4 o'clock then for meditation.
Okay.
We'll be continuing with Healing Journey support. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shamangla. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have some water.
Bye.
Ram Ram.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
beta.
Thank you.
Ram Ram.
Okay, I'm shutting it down.
Yes.
Thank you, Niket ji.
Thank you.